here. First of all, this is not a regular formal commission meeting in as much as the commissioners cannot make any kind of formal decisions, take a vote or anything, because this is a working discussion, working meeting. Official formal decisions will be made this evening or at a later date as determined by the commission. Since it is a working meeting and the panel requested this meeting, it's essentially your meeting, gents. A few ground rules first. Y'all get the first word, and then as the presentation progresses, each commissioner will have the opportunity to ask questions if they feel it necessary, and we'll work that one to death, whatever needs to be done, until the commissioner asking the question feels that he's got a suitable answer. Given the hour, it's 5. We got a regular commission meeting at 6:30, so with the permission of the rest of the commissioners, we'll limit this to an hour and 15 minutes. That'll give us about a 10 or 15 minute break between meetings. Is that okay with commissioners? Okay, all right.
That's fine.
Second item. This is a discussion between the municipal panel, tongue-tied, between the panel and the commissioners. As such, the discussion is taking place this way, and we have, with city staff involved too. Those sitting out here in the audience are observers to the extent that your observers the same as those watching on TV at home. Anyone in the audience out here who wants to make a comment about anything that was discussed will have the opportunity to do so at the regular commission meeting, because there's an item on the agenda that continues this. So having said that, commissioners, any other items that you want to feel is necessary?
No. I've got one item to,
all right, go ahead.
To bring up. In the agenda for the commission meeting, the discussion for, let me find it. Item number 8, discussion on municipal building renovation project. I propose that when we get to the meeting, the regular commission meeting, that we move that from item number 8 up on the agenda, so folks who want to talk about that item can speak, and then because there's other business that we need to transact,
sure.
That I'm sure there's other parties here that have no interest in anything other than that specific
right.
topic.
Any objections to that?
That's
okay,
fine.
We'll do that then.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Well, I've been asked to be the spokesperson. Let me get this up where it's not going to behave itself. Hopefully you can hear me through the speaker. All right. On October 14th, 7 members of the community were appointed to you by you, commissioners, to form a municipal facilities advisory panel. These members are John Kidwell, Doug Mish, Mike Mongan, Steve Moody, James Taylor Jr., Rick Thompson, and myself, Neil Barkley. We took our job seriously, and with the cooperation of city staff, looked into every aspect of the municipal facilities that we could think of. We deliberated long and hard to arrive at this point, and today we come before you to present our findings and recommendations. I'm sure that you'll have many questions about what we did, how we did it, and how we came to our conclusions, but I respectfully request that you hold your questions and comments until the end of my presentation. At that time, we'll also distribute some written information about our recommendations for you to consider more carefully. Will that work for you, Mr. Faulkner? So I'll kind of start with the beginning. Our task, as we understood it, was to evaluate the service center, the municipal building, and the firehouse, and then to make recommendations to the City Commission on a path forward. Our process, we met as a group 11 times, at which times we toured the service center, toured the fire department, toured the municipal building on several occasions, toured the former Walmart building, and toured several police fire department buildings in other communities, including Wellington, Derby, Mulvane, and Eudora. At each of these visits, we questioned city employees as to their needs and wants. In the case of the other communities, we also asked what they liked and disliked about their buildings. We consulted with the city architect and SFS and their engineering consultant, PEC, to understand how they came to the design that was presented. We studied the PEC SFS reports and recommendations and reviewed the architectural drawings. We consulted with Dennis Jacobs on the designs provided by SFS. We consulted with Paul Kreitz on the strict meanings of the issue voted upon and passed by the city for the sales tax that funds these renovations. Our recommendations and reasons. Our first recommendation is to build a standalone fire police station building that's more centrally located for the community, residential and commercial buildings. We're recommending probably a pre-engineered free-span building, and we have a letter from bond counsel that says that to the city finance director stating that the bonds could be used for new construction of a fire and police station. For the fire station, and these are kind of some of the ideas or things that we thought about, the expense, excuse me, the expense to renovate and add to the existing fire station to meet the current needs, and I stress just the current needs, is extremely costly. There was a bid of $1.7 million for that. The renovation design only meets the current minimum requirements for equipment and personnel space. Future fire trucks are likely not to fit into the existing building without modifications. You know, the fire trucks are getting bigger, as many things are. The police department, although the municipal building design met most of the police criteria, it used every bit of available space and did not include a sally port for the safe transfer of prisoners to the facility. Having the police in the same building as the city offices requires more extensive and expensive security. There were bid estimates about $750,000 just for the kind of security that would be required to protect the city offices. And there's no room for expansion if and when police regulations change in the future. And as we all know, we can't see the crystal ball, but it seems like there's more regulations coming down in terms of, you know, accessibility and protection and things of that nature. The pros of new construction. We believe it will be less costly than the renovations. New construction will likely have fewer and less costly change orders than a renovation. And I think, as you've seen with the recreation building, until you get into it, you really don't know what kind of change orders you might have. Obviously, with new construction, there can be change orders, but those are things that you desire, you know, that you want an extra room or you want an extra something. A more central location for the fire department would reduce response times for firefighters and some insurance costs for residents. A new building is an outward sign of positive growth and attitude in the community. A new facility will aid in the recruitment and retention of the best employees. And a new facility can be expanded or remodeled as future needs change. The second recommendation is to remodel the second floor of the municipal building, a minor renovation. This renovation would renovate the offices and the space similar to what was there previously, but updated. You know, put in new HVAC, put in new room dividers. It would be renovated in such a way in the restrooms to meet the ADA standards. Install new HVAC with zone heating and cooling for the various offices. Upgrade the electrical where needed, and upgrade the communication wiring and fiber optics where needed. The pros of this is that by doing it in this fashion, we keep the current historical architectural features, such as the stairways, columns, and marble walls. The design as came out by SFS, a lot of that would be obstructed or obliterated or completely taken out. And I think the panel agrees it's a beautiful building that we would like to maintain some of that beauty in the future. With the service center on 8th Street, there's ample room for the city staff within the existing second floor space. The cost and the time duration for renovation will be greatly reduced because they're not tearing out floors and doing that extensive kind of work. And then the noise impact on the third floor tenants will be greatly reduced. And that was a concern that we got several times in, you know, jackhammering and things like that. They couldn't hold court while some of those activities were going, whereas what we're proposing is the kind of renovation that's not as noisy, or the noisy part could be done on weekends, a fairly small amount. And then the next recommendation is to rehabilitate the first floor. And in that, what we had in mind was remove the partition walls, improve the ADA access from the west entrance to the elevator, and then in the future, seek out tenants for the first floor. And if someone expresses a good desire to move in, do the renovation then. You know, make it fit their needs, and then you can charge accordingly. And then the final recommendation is provide secondary egress from the third floor, and this was one that is a necessity under because of the fire codes, is to have another way out of that third floor. What the architects had proposed was taking out all the stairs on the west side and building an internal stairway, and although it's not as aesthetically pleasing, an external stairway would meet the needs, would only be used in emergencies, and we feel that it would greatly reduce the costs. And then we had, and this stuff's all written out, and I'll give you copies of this in a moment. We had really three other things that are more of concerns and recommendations, but not written recommendations. And one is we would recommend that the city consider getting a different architectural firm. And nothing against these guys, I think they're good, but it seemed pretty obvious to us that they've got so much invested in this design that they don't really want to move off of that. And again, you all do what you need to do there. We estimate the savings of more than $3 million compared to the $8.5 million that the bids came out for the fire department and the municipal building. We believe that those are real numbers, and we've got some backup to substantiate that. And then finally, we would like to see the council, as they did with this group, have a citizens group that can kind of help them watch over the construction, not be construction managers or anything, but to observe, see what they're doing and help guide them and bring concerns back to the commission when they need to and for their decisions to be made. So that's short and sweet. I do have handouts, and I will get those. Hopefully I've got.
Mr. Service Utilities Office. Mr. Utilities Office.
Leave it where it's at on 8th Street.
I thought they're looking at what's it fix and stuff.
I don't understand what you're asking.
I thought they were going to recommend what to do.
As we're handing those out, I'll leave some up here.
Well, the recommendations to leave it on 8th Street where it's at now. You're talking about customer service, right?
Yeah, I thought they were going to tell us what needs fixed first.
I'm sorry.
What needs fixed on 8th Street?
Because it needs repairs.
We've already really addressed that.
I thought we had.
Neil, will you bring some for the staff table?
I thought that's the whole reason why we set them over there was to.
I've only got one set.
That's not good.
Well, you're just batting 1,000, aren't you?
We're going to need our own work session for this. We're going to need our own work session for this. Bring your own.
I got it.
Hope you like sweet coffee.
You, oh, okay.
Now, there's a lot in here, and I'll kind of try to walk you through what we have. I just had them, for convenience, had it all stapled together as one. So as we walk through there, obviously our notes are on the first couple pages. The next page contains the cost comparison. And at the top of the page, you can see what the bids were that came back for the municipal building and the city hall and the fire station, $8.496 million. The approximate cost for standalone police fire station we believe to be around $3.5 million. SFS estimated that the second floor, per the original plan, would be $3.2 million. So if you just did those things, it would be 6.7, and that would save money. If we go on, again, looking at the approximate cost of the police and fire station, we believe that the second floor renovations could be more like $1.5 million, in which case you would save, I show over $3 million over the base bid. And again, those bids didn't include what they run into as they go, what kind of change orders they might run into. The sheet behind it shows, and this is just what PEC and SFS put together on their estimate of the work. This is where they estimated the cost for a standalone fire station. They had a number of $325 per square foot. We believe that that's a very high number. In the other cities we talked to, they were doing it for much less. The standard, when you look at the national construction standards, they show between 200 and 250 as a per square foot cost for that type of structure. If you go to the, excuse me, it's just place. Yeah. Right, if you go to the
What were
next
those numbers
page.
again?
Briggs, I'm sorry.
What were those numbers again?
It should be in your second page, and if you go to the next set of drawing, or it has that square foot cost analysis. I kind of jumped ahead of myself. So it says square foot cost analysis, are you on that page?
Okay.
Yeah, that,
And they were, SFS was saying what per square foot?
$325 a square foot for the police
325.
station.
And your national averages, you say were 200 to what?
Yeah, and we have that attached as well.
It's the next page.
It's on the square foot analysis. If you look at the, if you move down 3 more
Okay.
pages, and there's a 3 with a circle at the bottom.
Got
that's
it.
square foot analysis for fire station.
Got it.
The next page has square foot analysis for police stations at the bottom, and we circled the $213 in Dallas, for instance. The 161 we got was based on, somebody's gonna have to help me with that. Where'd the 161 come from?
What's every cousin? What is this?
Right. Okay. All right. So anyway, that cost breakdown, the fire station remodel, and it kind of starts at the top. There's 11,000 square feet at the fire station. The bid was $1.696 million. When you add 5% for the design, that comes out to $161 a square foot. The police station renovation, as the architects had told us that it was about $4 million for the first floor. That comes out to $458 a square foot. If you go into the middle of it, per the DCD, which is the standards that construction used for fire stations, they believe it'd be $142.15 a square foot. We've escalated that a little bit because that was a June of 13 analysis to $145.29 a square foot. Using that same 11,000 square feet comes to $1,000,006. So there's not a lot of savings in going to a new fire station, but you've got a new fire station that can handle the bigger trucks, can give all the ADA accessible and the needs of the fire department. The next line down, it says as per RS means measures of dollar per square foot, and this is for a police station. It's from a little different source. They show, and that's the one where I pointed out that Dallas construction costs are $213.09 a square foot. Add a 1.1% per year for escalation. That comes up to $215.43 per square foot, which would be $2.369 million for that. And then as you can look at that and you can say those numbers are what they are, but we went to the real world. We went to Eudora, Kansas, and talked to them about the fire station that they built in 2014. And they had 21,000 square feet. They built it for $146 a square foot. So, kind of make sure that we're in the right ballpark. So if they can do it for that, our 215 number is probably strong, if anything. And the next few pages are back up to that. It's where we got that information, like I said, through the construction codes and such. And then continuing on, and this is in the packet that everyone received, is the letter from Roger Gossard, the chief judge, to the city, to Gary Bradley, explaining their concerns about the third, for them while the renovations are going on. And I won't bore you with that. I'm sure that many of you have read that before. And then the last page of that next section is a memo that came from Robert Beaver, who's the county's, does the county roads and bridges and other infrastructure things. And this was just his conversation that he didn't feel like he was involved in any of the discussions about what was going to happen in the municipal building in terms of what it might mean in impact to the third floor. And then finally, there's the Gilmore Bell. letter to the finance director of the city explaining that in their opinion, the bonds, if we have a bond issue, that the bonds could be used for new construction. And I'm sure your council can interpret that if you need it interpreted, but that's the way we understood when we talked to Mr. Kreitz. And then for the commission, you have the color photos of the Wellington building. That's a combined municipal building with fire and police, excuse me. Some of the photos of that facility. And I think that people oftentimes get the idea that a freestanding metal construction building, a red metal building, if you would, that they're not beautiful, and they can be. And as is demonstrated by these photos, they can be finished with brick facades and other enhanced architectural features to make them look pleasing and give long and lasting life. The other thing that's nice about this style of building is that none of the interior walls are support walls. So if the future needs change, you can move some walls, you can do some things. Obviously, for the police department needs, there'd have to be some hardened walls internally, and those can easily be constructed as well. That is my presentation. I appreciate your patience in letting me get through it. I know there's a lot of stuff here, but we felt it was important to kind of give it in total rather than give pieces where there might be questions that we were going to cover anyway. So with that, I'll let the commission ask questions of the rest of our board. Our panel, excuse me.
I've scratched out some notes here. Would anyone like to go first? Go ahead. All right. Pre-engineered versus, since you're making the pitch for a standalone facility, talk to us about pre-engineered versus conventional construction and both police and fire in the same building as opposed to separate buildings.
And I'm going to turn that to some of the panel members. I didn't actually, wasn't able to visit Wellington and Derby and Eudora and them, so which one of you want to speak up first?
I can answer part of that question. Pre-engineered buildings, as a general rule, has engineers that design their buildings for them. And the ones that were visited were designed by the manufacturer, the building manufacturer themselves. So all we would have to do is get their engineering that's included in the price of their building. And they've done numerous ones of these combined units. Combining them together in one building would save cost two ways. Land acquisition for one, but it also, you can share common quarters like they do now, but they have to cross the street. Training centers and whatnot can all be taken care of in the common area of the building itself.
And they do use architects as well.
I
I
hate
mean,
to
it's not just.
interrupt, but can he go to the mic so we can hear it back here, please?
Yeah. See if I can get this thing up without breaking. Can you hear me now back there all right? Everybody good? Okay, pre-engineered, what prefab buildings is what they call them. When you go to a company and they design your building, and the ones that we visited have all been designed by the manufacturer of the building. They have engineers that design those buildings for those certain needs. That comes with the package. You tell them what you want, and they will design it. All we'll have to do is get our engineer stamp or our architect stamp on it. And I don't know if that's local or not, but they design all that, and the standalone to two different units is land acquisition is one of them, and the second one is if we keep them in the same building, that lowers the cost itself, but they also have a common area where training can take place, meetings can take place, which we have now, but they have to go back and forth across the street. And the ones that have been visited really like the common area, because the fire department trains in there, the police department can train in there, they can have sit-down trainings and seminars and whatnot, takes care of both of those organizations' needs. Did that answer your question, or?
All right.
I'd like to add to that real quick. The buildings that we looked at in Wellington, we brought back the entire set of plans. They pulled out the plans for the building. So Dennis has a copy, a full set of the plans of that building. Now, the police are on one end, the fire's on the other. They have a common area. They have dispatch. Both windows just look at each other. They face each other. They have an entryway that has a set of public bathrooms. It has an area in it no bigger than this. It's actually smaller than this room right here that we're standing in, that we're in right now. That's a common area. They have a training room right behind that both police and fire use as training rooms. Okay, they just have to coordinate. And then behind that, they have an exercise area that both police and fire use as an exercise room. So, and then from there back is their is the locker rooms on both ends. They have they have their own separate, and they both maintain their areas separately. The only area that they had any issue in, and that was in talking to the fire chief and talking to the police chief, was the common area, and City Hall has to come clean that, But it was kind of funny, but they get along great. They had no problem. It's just that one area that was a common area, and that was the only area that they had any friction on. And other than that, both indicated it worked well. All the services, are all right there together, and they have their own independence on both ends. So, any other questions?
Okay. One of the comments you made was that the existing building might not accommodate future fire trucks. Not big. I wrote not big enough. Could you explain that? Have you actually gone out and, what are the size of the new fire trucks, vehicles? What is existing? What is the requirement?
And I don't know the requirement. I just know when we spoke to the fire chief, he said that some of the trucks now are bigger. Right now, they've raised the entrance once, but where it's at now, unless you raise the roof, you can't make it any taller. So some of the ladder trucks and things like that are high, that are of higher construction wouldn't fit in there without, again, buying a truck that's small enough to fit in there, but maybe that doesn't meet our future needs either.
So is that an assumption, or do you have numbers?
In most of the facilities we visited, the roofs, the lowest one that we visited was 14-foot opening, and there were some that were 16-foot.
And what's ours?
Ours is 11-foot.
Oh,
Yeah, 11
okay.
foot. So it's
And our
significant.
tallest truck is 8, and it's 11-foot where you cut it up.
Chief?
Well, yeah, probably 10-8, because when you open the door and you've got the accessories that go with the automatic door. Because we do have a low roof. That's true.
So we didn't go talk to fire truck manufacturers. We just relied on the fire chief.
All right. Okay. When you were talking about both the fire department and the police department in terms of recommendations, maybe I was trying to put words in your mouth, but when you started out, I believe you said you were going to talk about the pros and the cons. So I heard a lot of pros, but I didn't hear any cons. Not one. And, what's the downside of your recommendations, since we're trying to be transparent about this whole process?
Well, the reason it shows up all pros is we couldn't see any advantage to remodeling the existing building to what the architects had designed. We just didn't see any advantage there. In fact, all we saw were disadvantages. So we wrote down the pros. I mean, the reasons why we believe that that's positive. You're right, I didn't have any cons. The cons would be that, fire and police have to share maybe some common areas. They wouldn't have to, but the way we'd kind of thought about that, they would. They're not in the city offices. I mean, there's whatever advantage you have now of having police in the same place, you would lose. But that, and the fact that the fire department's right across the street, I mean, that's a convenience factor. So that's maybe a con if you put it someplace else in town, that they might have, they won't be as easily accessed from the city council.
All right, and
there's really not a lot of cons to it.
Okay, and your discussion when you were mentioning I believe 3 million was the figure you threw out. Did that include land acquisition?
It did not. We didn't include that.
Okay, did your savings also include the incremental costs of moving from one venue to another, one set of plans, one basic idea? In other words, we're still going to have to do work at City Hall. And I'll get to some of those on the first floor, but there are incremental costs involved as well. Had you taken a look at any of those incremental costs?
And I'm not sure I understand what costs you're talking about there, so.
Well,
And the land, let me give you back
neither
that.
am I.
First of
That's
all-
why I'm asking the
Yeah,
question.
First of all, the land acquisition, even though that, we feel that we put a pretty strong number out there and that you'd probably be able to buy the land for that, but, until you actually get to negotiation, you don't know what that's gonna cost. So that's an unknown. That is certainly an unknown, but we didn't feel it was our place to figure out what land's gonna cost or to select a site for that matter. But moving it west in general would be closer to our cities. You start looking at where the residents, the commercial buildings are, it gets it closer to the center of the residential universe anyway.
Okay.
And the other cost, wherever you go, if you go in or out, you're gonna have to move people and equipment and desks or whatever. So I don't know if those are the incremental costs, whether it's across town or next door while you do some remodeling, it's gonna require some of that. So those soft costs as the architects put into their.
Phone lines, computers, computer systems, fiber optic moving, there's a lot of costs that are figured in there. I think your cost, you're probably just looking at the basic building, is that correct? No? Okay, go ahead.
If you look on this chart here, it came from York, and this was a budget that was put together prior to building, and it came in at $3,100,000. If you look at it all broken down.
Yeah.
Where's that?
If you look where it's broke down there, it has
Okay, all right. Yeah, okay.
This was their original budget they put together before they started building at $3,134,000. Their actual cost was $3,200,000 and some change, so it was within basically 2%. If you look down the breakdown there, that's also including the 7.5% architect's fee, the builder's risk, the finance, the utilities, allowing for a bid escalation, $450,000 on site preparation. Mr. Taylor thought we could buy a whole city block. You talked about what, 225,000, you said? And with what site prep work you'd have to do, you could probably cover a lot of that land cost in that site prep and the rest of it, because that cost there is actually including everything. This is actually a Butler building. They provided the architect, they provided the engineer. It's their building. They put the whole thing up.
Their site preparation included 2 levels.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. There's $450,000 there, which is a lot more than you'd be looking at.
Okay, I understand, James, we don't have any of the architects' SFS here tonight, correct?
That's correct.
All right. A question, and a serious question for them based on what we've heard so far. If Eudora can put together a project like this at $143 per square foot, and the committee is coming up with what they're calling a strong number at $215, how did SFS get all the way to $325 per square foot? That's triple. That's triple, almost triple of what Eudora paid. So that's a serious question, because that would have had a significant estimate on the original price as presented. So that's a question for the architects, because there's a significant difference there. Yes.
We had a meeting with architects over at the city building here a couple weeks ago, and that was one of the questions I asked one of the designers of this program, because we asked them to give us a cost on a standalone police and fire. And when I asked them, it was a finger pointing game. They said, he's the one that come up with the numbers. So I went over and talked to him, and he said, he's the one that come up with the numbers. And I've been born and raised here. I've done work here all my life, but I did move to Denver, Colorado. Lived there for about 5 years. I did ground up work there. And about $280 a square foot in Denver, Colorado was the going rate. And I said, I don't understand where you come up. Nobody come up with an answer. Nobody would say anybody took responsibility for that number. That's one of the recommendations of us, saying I don't think they're really in the best interest of Coffeyville. I think they're wanting to make their dollar, and that's why we're asking you to consider maybe doing something a little different. I mean, I know it's a cost, and we've invested in them, but I think we need to let them finish what they got started and move on, just for the bang for the buck for us, for Coffeyville. But nobody took credit for it.
That's possibly one of the reasons I've dealt with architects for many years. The architect gets paid by what he charges, but the cost of the job, that's what he gets paid. And we talked to him about that up there. The first meeting we had with the architects, we asked them for a cost breakdown, roughly, not to the dollar, but a rough idea, percentage of what we were looking at the first floor and what we were looking at the second floor. They told us it wasn't a 50-50, it was more 60-40. 60% on the first floor because of the specialty items for the police station and all this, and 40% on the second. Well, even if their original estimate of $5 million, that means we're looking at $3 million on the first floor, $2 million on the second floor. Well, when they came back with the standalone fire station, police station bid or price, rough estimate, they bumped the second hall of City Hall back up to over $3,250,000, which bumped it up another $1,250,000. And when we tried to hold them to that, they told us they were just trying to do us a favor. So,
Do us a favor.
well, yeah, that's our favor. So, yeah.
I would like to add to that, in that meeting that we had with them, Cindy was there, I'm not sure James was there. One of the, when we started talking about the fire station, about looking at the fire station and a new police and fire station combination, they said, well, we're glad you're looking at a new fire station, because there really isn't a lot we could do with the old building. Now, they said that in the meeting.
One of my questions, what do you propose we do with the old fire department?
That would be a question that you would have to honestly defer to the fire chief. There has been discussion. I mean, we've even talked, and we think it's a great idea. Really not. We think that having for ISO standards, having a separate fire station, limited use, using the old fire station as limited use, doing very little to it at this point would make sense for the community. Moving west, you have a 1.5 mile pumper truck and 2.5 mile ladder truck, and our ISO rating is very important to the city. Both to business and individuals. Keeping that rating. I know that that there's been a lot of discussion about having two separate facilities. We've had that before, but in this instance where we already have an existing building, that would be a great option to have, and it would help us on our ratings, on our fire ratings. So,
What is the ISO rating now?
71.
Is that good?
Yes.
Where it sits today in capacity right now, it's good. Okay.
now,
Okay.
he can probably better explain that, but we're kind of on the edge of possibly losing that, if I'm, in that way we understand that.
We became a 3 in 2011, and it's unusual for one station to have a 3 rating. Some of the things that we did, now Parsons is doing, but they have 2 stations. So So that gives them an advantage. So we are, for instance, if the range is 70 to 79, we are a 70 point something. That's our 3. We're into the 3.
Then you need this map. Would that explain it? That you gave us?
I don't know, Mike.
Yeah, based on the ISO ratings and what we looked at, if you were to leave the existing fire station and minimal of 2, I think Fire Chief had indicated that he would like to see 2 people in the existing fire station. And then moving west, we would be able to have better coverage and better ISO standards. Or keep our rating anyway for the long haul in Coffeyville.
You want to do this and this.
Well, what ISO is based on your, you have coverage, for lack of a better word. So we take 1.5 miles from where we are now, that's the range for a pumper. And then you take 2.5 miles from that. But that's where we are now. That gave us, it was good enough for us to become a 3 because of the other things that we did. The other things that we did.
The more people you're capturing.
The familiarizations with downtown, the way that we have callback now, and if we were to get a centralized dispatch, that would even help us even more.
Yeah.
That's what has helped Parsons. I mean, I don't think that's a. I think that's a pipe dream.
So if I could, Chief.
In Montgomery
so
County.
Under this proposal, a relocation, a new building somewhere else, would it positively or negatively impact that rating?
I don't think it would affect it at all.
Wouldn't affect it at all?
I think we would still remain at 3.
Okay.
It
Chief Celeste, if you could work your way forward.
Well, the concern I have with the central location is Walmart, all these guys are still out there. And according to the East Side redevelopment plan, we're wanting to have things back out there. So what if we move everything out here, then 15 years from now, we have a whole bunch going on here?
That's why when I heard that this was going to be something that they proposed, that I said, well, why don't we use the existing station so that we'll have the ability to respond from there also.
The population may have moved to a different location, but the physical city boundaries that this fire department and police department are responsible for are the same that they were before the flood. They're the same that they are today. So anything that happens within that physical area, they're responsible for. Nothing has changed as far as the physical boundaries of the city. Am I correct?
Actually, it's expanded west because of the Walmart.
East.
East. It's actually expanded east. Right.
Chief, do we not have responsibility at the industrial park as well?
We do. We do.
Dan, can you tell us what makes up that rating? What all is considered for that rating? Like
There's
response time and what else?
water distribution, and we have good water mains. The way we take emergency, the 911 calls. So that's why I say if we were centralized, we would have more dispatchers on duty. And granted, they're taking calls for the entire county, but just to have more gets you more points. The training that the fire department does, the inspections that you do. Tony, you're familiar with that. What am I missing? Equipment. Right, equipment does. And we are at a 1 on our water supply. Our water supply is really good.
How are you on your response time?
We're close.
What's that mean?
I think you have to do like 80% of your area within 4 minutes. So, you know, that's based off of the numbers that we write down in our reports.
That's an average, though.
Well, and it's for structure fires. It's not for, I mean, when we used to go and do life flights at the hospital, that was probably 15, 20-minute response sometimes.
I think the point is, and as a panel, we just looked at it from the dollars and cents of having a single facility. James brought up the idea of having a second building, and it makes sense. What he's saying makes sense, things we didn't consider. If we can use that, or if we decide to use the existing, it may make this a little bit smaller and even more cost-effective. But we didn't look at it that way. We just said, you move everything out to a new building, this is what it will cost you. So I think that you know, there's some things that have to be worked out, some details. Obviously, you know, we're going to defer to the fire chief. He knows what this stuff means. We just looked at it from the dollars and cents.
Well, and when this started,
Both be correct.
yeah, and when this started, I wasn't a fan of a new police and fire in the central part of town, well, further west. I didn't really think it would have much traction. But when it appeared that that was going to be the proposal, well, then to me, what's the best of the best? Because we do have businesses that are on the east side of town, and hopefully we redevelop that area to have more. So as he said earlier, it wouldn't make sense to move away from them and then have to move, once we grow, move back.
Well, that's kind of what I mean, I feel like we're abandoning one side of the town.
But I don't think we ever said where you should put the fire station. We said that you should put a new fire station. That's something.
Oh, no, I did say further west,
Yeah.
but we, you know, again, just to make sure that we're trying to kind of show, I would say worst case, but a real case of what it would be if we had a separate standalone building. There's considerations, and if we continue to use the existing fire station, this one could be a little bit smaller and save us even more money.
Well,
It could be built in such a way that we can expand it in the future if we need to.
The flip side of that coin, without taking a serious look at the comments, at the conditions that Commissioner Williams just mentioned about the requirements remaining there, I mean, it's akin to, pardon the expression, you know, pulling a pin on a hand grenade, throwing it in the room, and then closing the door, you know? Have a new station. Where? That's up to you.
Some people may not know, we had a second station at one time. Why did that station not succeed, and we had more population at that time?
I think that had to do with manning. We had more manpower at the time, too.
And it didn't succeed because of that? That's what my question was, why would we expect that two would survive now in a town with less population?
Well, I think we had 9 more firefighters, and I think it came down to, I think at that time the union was in litigation for minimum manning of those stations, and the city said, if that happens, we'll close down the second station, and all that happened.
And what does the current union contract say as far as manpower?
It just says a minimum of 5 on shift. It doesn't say anything about Station 1 or Station 2, I don't believe.
But would that not open the door to negotiation if you put a new fire station somewhere?
It could, Chris.
So theoretically, they could come in, the union could come in and has to have 5 people at each station.
And we currently have what?
Pardon me?
We currently have how many on?
5. Minimum of 5, right.
We're holding just the minimum right now.
Right.
Okay.
Well, we have 6. That means one person can be on vacation or sick leave at a time, and then
Okay.
we maintain that 5.
Thank you.
Okay. Chief Celeste. Notwithstanding the territorial considerations, would co-locating in the same building or in a new structure, would it positively or negatively impact the certification that you're seeking for the Coffeyville Police Department?
If you're referring to the CLIA accreditation, it would not have any negative effect on that. And I don't see any negative effects on the department, on either department as a whole. Most organizations organizations or government entities that pursue those combined stations. They're pretty well separate to, they're essentially two separate buildings with a shared common area. So there's really not a lot of issues at all that come up with those.
How important is the Sally Port to you? And does Independence, they have one?
Independence uses the county jail. The county jail does have a Sally Port.
That's not entirely true, because the city prisoners are taken there to be booked first. When they go on a felony charge, they go to the county. So all the municipal prisoners go to the city police department, and they go through the alley just like the police department here.
Okay, I apologize. I wasn't aware exactly the procedure, but generally serious felonies and crimes go to the county jail. A Sally Port would certainly add safety to our officers and to our prisoners. It would certainly be an issue or a facility that we would like to have to build that extra safety in our handling of our prisoners. It's not an absolute necessity.
Does
Explain to the audience what it is.
What a Sally Port is when we're handling a person that's under arrest. It's basically a garage that allows us to, with the prisoner secured in our vehicles, drive into the garage, close the door, so we're now enclosed indoors in a secure facility. Allows then the officer to secure his firearm while the prisoner is still secured in his vehicle. Be locked up before we then remove the prisoner from the vehicle, and it prevents escape risk. It prevents any fights over an officer's weapon, things like that. So it just is a enhanced level of security when we're handling prisoners.
Okay. During the presentation, you made comment about seeking tenants for the first floor in the city, in the existing city hall. What considerations were given for security on the second floor for city offices and the courtroom facilities? How would you manage that?
one thing I'm concerned about that is we have many empty buildings downtown already. I don't know that we have prime real estate down here that'd be a viable option to me.
Yeah.
Was that a consideration, or was that just an idea?
Well, what we looked at was the fact that if the police are in there, it has to have much heightened security. And again, going back to the architects, their plan was to have the city utility collection people there as well, and so they had all elaborate plans of entry doors and key locks and things of that nature. That wouldn't be required, and it really, the security is no different than it is today, or was a year ago, in that people can get into the building to come to the city offices. Now, when they remodel, they may have different locking doors and maybe make that more secure, but we did not, we didn't envision anything elaborate. We believe that the dollars that we had proposed for the second floor would be enough to make it whatever we need. The thing about the first floor was we were suggesting that the interior walls be taken out, kind of demoed out, and that entry from the west, which is really the ADA entrance, that would be modified in such a way that people could get in to the elevator and get to whichever floor they need to go to, but they wouldn't have access to just the whole building to run around. If in the future we put in, or someone wants to be a tenant in the first floor, I don't know who that might be, maybe a county office or something, we could find out what their needs are and remodel it in such a way that it meets their needs, and then secure it in such a way that works for them and for the city. So again, without knowing who the specific tenant is and what their needs are, we really didn't do that. But rather than remodel it for a tenant that doesn't exist, we would leave it for currently for storage and other things that the city might want.
Okay. You also mentioned, as part of that, on the second floor, you mentioned not having to tear out the floors. I understood from a previous conversation, I believe it was with one of the gents from Decker, when they were talking about the initial look at the first floor. There was a requirement. They were looking at tearing up floors in order to get to the old piping that was in there. Was that still in the plans as far as renovation goes? Go ahead.
That would probably just be saw cuts in the floor. They can come in if it's, and I don't remember the basement if it's concrete or marble. But the saw cuts in the floor, I mean, that's common practice in any remodel. You'll saw cut them out, then you patch them back. If it's marble, they'll have to deal with that part of it. I think we have some marble up in Kansas City at storage. But one thing, and I heard, and it's strictly just what I heard, like Kansas Works is looking for a contract right now to move, Kansas Unemployment. That would be an ideal place for them to go in our city office. I mean, that's something that we can tenant finish to suit their needs. County Health is another one that we could do, if we even had to pursue them a little bit. Where they're at now is not a good place. I mean, it's not clean, and that's things that we can do a tenant finish on, and the rent we get from them can include the fit out to get them up and going what they want to. They're going to have a nice new facility that's needed, and that will function for them. It's going to be built the way they want.
So you're kind of talking like the Arco building is in Independence, where
Yeah, the Arco building was, because that was, I mean,
it's not as huge.
but
And
they've got, and they brought in outside people, and the first floor could be done that way, and we would have some income to help pay for those remodels. And going back to the fire station, we're not talking moving it 3 or 4 miles out. I mean, I think you can find some land within a mile of where it's at, which the response time would be quicker to the highway and get them to where they need to go. And then as the east develops, go ahead and use the original fireplace as a substation, and then see how the money goes. If we can fill it up with houses and get people going out there and get a lot of businesses, we might need to build another fire station. We're going to have a good experience at building this one. I mean, we don't need to spend money we don't have, but if we know the money's coming in, and I think the East Development is a very good program. We need to do something over there, but it's not happening right now. I mean, I know it's in the works, but we need to take care of what we got to. And if we just move this new standalone, and I'm not going to mention locations because I've got 2 or 3 in my head, but if we can just move it a little bit, and where we can expand it as we need to grow, and like James, the fire chief, he's needing to still take care of the industrial park. He still needs to take care of those. He's not going to get there in 4 minutes. I mean, that's why that's an average. But we still have to take care of that. And if we're close to the highway, they can get on the highway and zip through town. They don't have to go through Patterson Boulevard or down 4th Street or, to get out there. They can get there a lot quicker. So I don't know if the response times will be that much different if we just move it a mile or so from where it's at. My house, I've got a 2-mile radius on my insurance. I'd still be in that same plan. I mean, I'm 6 blocks away from it now. And, those are things that I think everybody needs to discuss. And as a panel, we talked about those, but we was more economical and future growth in our decisions and recommendations.
Was there any discussion on a new elevator and
No.
going on up to the 3rd floor with all new plumbing and electric?
No.
And why was there not either one?
We discussed all, and I call it trivials. The center hole and the spindle.
No,
center.
I don't know.
But the elevator probably needs to be addressed and
I was-
brought up to date. I mean,
I was
that's part
told
of
it may
that.
not be up to ADA. I'm not, you know anything about that?
No.
But that could be.
Elevator's not up to ADA?
Somebody told me, the question was brought up, is it wide enough, is it up to date? It's been there since I was a kid.
Dennis, you have a comment on that?
I think it's ADA compliant. You need a 5-foot width, and I think that elevator is supposed to be that. I know it is lengthwise.
And I think the architect's plan was just to stop at the 2nd floor. There's been some question, why don't we just go ahead, seeing as how you would have 1920 up here and 2015 down there. What was you guys' thoughts on that?
We talked about it quite a bit, and first of all, since it wasn't in SFS, or in the scope of the original thing, we didn't want to go there because it might muddy the waters. We don't know what it's going to cost there because they didn't do a detailed engineering design. We don't know what the infrastructure needs are. Clearly, there are some, and speaking with the county, they brought up some concerns that we were not aware of, and it's not completely clear to the panel what our obligation is as a city to provide those courthouses and stuff. So that's something that has to be worked out. We would, I think with what we propose, that we've saved enough money that if we wanted to spend some money on the 3rd floor, that we would be able to do that. Really, all that the architect showed was, I think, some new mechanical gear for the elevator, and then this escape stairway out the west side for the egress, or that would have to actually go through the floors.
I'm sorry.
I just had one more. On the external fire escape, did you guys have a location, or was that just an idea?
West side.
West side.
Yeah, either the west or the north, but
Okay,
the west is
that's all
kind
I
of what we
had.
were
I was
thinking.
curious.
so.
I have some questions after your.
So do I when your guys are ready.
Wanted to double back on the comment I made earlier. Kind of stay with me, if you will, kind of as we connect the dots on this. SFS, okay, the fee that we pay them is based on the estimated cost of the project, a percentage of the project. Is that correct?
You've approved the contract with SFS already.
I know, but their fee was based on the projected cost of as a percentage of the project. Is that correct?
Not that I don't know for sure. We'd have to go back and look at the notes and the estimates
That was
made.
my understanding.
I don't know
Was
that they.
It was a percentage of the project. If that's true, and they use $325 per square foot, and we now know that there's a lower practical cost that has been discovered by the panel out there, would there be a way to get them to become unmarried to that cost as a percentage and consider that a portion of the fees or the contract already written would also be able to allow us to continue using them if we decide to go with these new projects, because obviously there's going to have to be new architectural drawings done for the existing buildings. Point being, if we change firms, as you suggested, we still have a contractual obligation with them based on the work that they've done, and that's essentially money down a rat hole at this point, at a rather expensive $325 per square foot. So I would rather try and work with them, convince them to reduce that price, and say, yeah, okay, we recognize that we were high, and we'll continue to work with you for redesign of other facilities. Is that even possible? That's not, that's just kind of thinking out loud. Is that possible?
What's the current amount of money we owe them right now? It's like $750,000. That's going to be, either way, we got to spend $750,000.
We've paid them $747,000. The balance remaining is $91,470 with what has been approved so far with contracts with the architects.
So that would mean if we switch architects, we've got essentially $850,000 down a rat hole. That's why I would try and convince them to work with us. Otherwise, it's money that's gone.
But if they, right now the deal is they're, as I said, they're not wanting to change stuff. They're kind of set in stone. I think if we want to work with them in the past, we need to sit down with them and tell them that this is what we want, that this is how things are going to work, that they can't take the reins and do with what they please and not listen to our recommendations, or not our recommendations, but what we want to do.
First question that I have is this proposal the 100% consensus of this panel, or is this a majority rules?
I think it was mostly a majority.
So
Okay.
there is a minority report.
Okay.
We've got a minority, well, I wouldn't say that. Jim agreed
that-
with a lot of things that we talked about. We had some disagreements, and we worked out some compromises in coming up with our plan.
Only got like 7 more minutes, so
Thank you, Neil. You guys can see by now we've opened up a can of worms, okay? There's lots to consider with the third floor, okay, the new building versus old. When I came onto this panel, I was really focused on the building itself. We had some of our panel that was more focused on the new building from the very start. I talked to some of that panel member before we were elected, and I realized that. However, I knew that needed to be looked at. I'm with the panel with their choice. But how I would vote, I want to know what the city of Coffeyville wants to do.
That was my
Okay.
that brings me in my next question.
Let
My
me
next-
finish if I could now. sit
Okay,
down.
I'm sorry,
Okay, we
I
only
just got a
2
limited
minutes.
amount of time. So
It's always cheaper to build a new building than it is to remodel an old one. Everybody knows that that's been in the business. It's about twice the money per square foot. Does the city want a nice building and remodel with the new central heat and air, with the elevator, with all the stuff? Do they want to be there, or do they want to be somewhere else? Economics, here you got it, okay? And I'm with them. But the city needs to make a decision where they want to be in this building or do something else. It's probably going to be cheaper to do something else. But if you look in 500 years down the road, like in Germany, and their buildings, their structures, we've got one right here. Do we want to put the money in it? Okay? Or do we want to move into a building that's more economical? I don't know how much money we've got, okay? It's a big question on everybody's mind right now. And a lot of these people I've talked to out here in the last few weeks that didn't have this information we have now, ready to get back in the building. As you know, you've talked to some of them. So we really have a question, what we want to do as a city is what we want. We have a lot to talk about. And one of the things that I have not had a chance to talk to the panel about is, I've been busy, okay, the last few weeks. I've been very, very busy and haven't had time to really, we wanted to have a few more meetings and it didn't happen, or I wanted to. But how's this paid for? What the city wants to do? We've got to look at the third floor and the second floor and the first floor and all that. And I don't think you're going to be able to get through a smart decision tonight during your meeting. We've opened up a can of worms somewhat, but I'm with the panel. They're pretty smart on this stuff. Some of the engineering and some of the business minds we've had on here have looked at it in a very good way. And I would probably, if that's what the city of Coffeyville wants to do, that's probably what I'd want to do too. But we do have an issue with the legalities and we really haven't talked about that whole much. But we've got a city attorney we can talk to about that, get into a little bit where we're at on our legalities. On the contract, I guess we've paid them I know that money was partly for the library and partly for the Boys Club and partly on this, and we've probably thrown that money away, but I'm questioning whether we need to probably stick with them and maybe do a third-party review and keep them. I don't quite understand how this architectural stuff works. I'm over my head, but if we do decide to do something with that building, we probably don't want to change the PEC, the electrical engineers and mechanical engineers and all that. So I know we're about out of time.
You have anything else? Because I have some questions too.
You had a question?
First of all, we were supposed to end this at 6:15. I move that we continue it to 6:25 so we can
Yes.
get our questions in. My second question is that we have a legal opinion based upon bond counsel that the wording of the sales tax, which it clearly says in here, including but not limited to improvements to public buildings. Bond counsel says that we can use that sales tax to build new structures, and our city attorney agrees with that. That's one thing about attorneys, though. Every attorney you ask has a different opinion. My question is if we went to the voters as a city government and asked to improve municipal buildings, and then we turn around and take that money and build new municipal buildings, what's the difference between that and what happened with the past commissions where they passed a sales tax for economic development and then took that money and used it to buy or pay for an aquatic center?
Well said.
I would question one thing. What kind of money can we save? What's the most cost-effective means to do the job?
And I absolutely agree with you, but my stance is that if you have to go back to the voters if you want to build new. And the reason is because I feel like that we're, by taking that money and using it for something strictly different, and this is strictly my opinion. I'm not speaking for anybody else.
Okay, I'll speak to the flip side of that quickly. We have bond counsel and attorney opinion that it can be used. I think that the decision as to which direction to proceed based on these recommendations, further discussions with staff, architects, and contractors rests with this group, because that kind of a decision would be based on facts and study, where a vote of the people would be based, it would be an emotional response based on flyers and
Well, then I ask you to
sound
take this
bites.
in, did I then I ask you to take that in consideration when you cast your vote?
Anything else?
All right.
Any
Commissioner
questions?
Williams?
Yes, sir.
The money that was raised for the economic development and was then, in, I believe your words, diverted to an aquatic park, was a decision of that commission.
I agree.
In my humble opinion, and I expressed it when it happened, that entire commission should have been charged with malfeasance, if not something more felonious. They were under the thumb and the direction of a city manager at the time who was building his resume, and that's all he cared about. And he did everything he could do to control that commission, and he subsequently was permitted to leave, and thank goodness that entire commission is no longer here. I don't even remember who was sitting on the commission at the time, but I brought it up to two attorneys, one of which was assistant attorney at the Capitol in Topeka, and he said, yes, you probably could bring malfeasance charges, but it would take a long time to prove it, and by that time they would be gone. It was
My
it was
point
an abomination.
My point is that it's a moral struggle.
I don't disagree, but if this commission holds steady with the plan, any subsequent commission, including anybody up here who's going to run for re-election, you are then a new commission, and you can change the plans. But the wrath of the people will come down upon you.
I would like to point out one thing.
Wait,
Are we changing, are we doing anything different with the funds? You're saying, we're talking about buildings, remodel versus new, but are we doing actually anything different with the money?
It's going to be devoted to fire and police and administration, okay? We are remodeling City Hall, okay? We are supporting the police department with, with new structure, and also the fire department. And you're actually getting what you need with the police department, with the Sallyport and what they need. You're getting a fire department with future expansion and needs for the larger trucks. We're actually doing what should have been done in the first place, and that was do the due diligence in the very get-go a long time ago that wasn't done. And then that question could have been asked and answered properly.
We can't, to quote one of our world leaders, we can't manage the past.
Right.
But what we can do is impact the future, and that's why you all are here, and that's why we're asking questions. You had some questions?
Yes, I have some questions.
I'm sorry.
Chris, I've been here all my life, many years, and I've traveled around to look at all these different entities we've talked about. We have had many, many discussions. We've talked to James, we've talked to other police chiefs, fire chiefs. We've done a lot of due diligence on that. And I, for one, would like to see something new happen in Coffeyville. We're in dire need of something to spark us on. And I look at this project, if we can do it and save money doing it and come up with a new facility that would do a better job of serving our community, I don't think we have a choice.
But right now, the thing is, it's not a thing, it should be all the time. We got, getting ready to have 3 of our largest industrial buildings sitting empty out there, and I'm not sure that we're setting an example by building a new building right now, which is not what the citizens were
And are
at.
we setting an example by doing it at a cheaper price and getting a better structure? Are we setting a good example by doing that?
My plans aren't $6.8 million, so I can't really say that.
And that brings me to another question, is that on this proposal to remodel the second floor, does that take into account putting new, does that put new plumbing in the building? Does that put new electric in the building?
For the
Does that put new,
We're not wanting to go in and tear out a lot of permanent wall.
does that put new windows in the building?
Windows was in the original.
It was in, I thought we had it added because.
I thought we did too.
We had it added in there, which brought the cost up significantly because the original architecture drawing put in several, however many, $100,000s of dollars worth of heating and air and didn't address a single window in the building, and the windows gap open in that building like that. So what's the purpose of putting new heating and air in a building that your windows gap open that? And I know we're going through specifics here and getting really down to specifics in the building, but if all those things need to be addressed.
We're not giving you a firm bid.
Okay.
And we're not architects. We weren't trying to redesign second floor. We thought it could be done differently for a lot less money. And how much less money, what you decide or what we all decide is what's needed. We have to get into that in the details. And back to your question, Chris, we were concerned about that too, is can we legally do what we need to do? And that's why we got with bond counsel. But we also wrestled with, it was really brought to the community as, here's some money to rehab all these buildings, and there, the Perkins Building, the rec center, and the library, and that stuff needed to happen. And you're right, the people may think they're being sold a bill of goods, that it's a bait and switch or whatever, but we were asked to look at that and figure out what's the best path forward. We believe this is. If there's an issue with the community, I think that after this meeting, you will probably hear about it, one way or the other, pros, cons, pluses, minuses, and people's opinions.
Okay, I have a few questions. I'm going to wait a little bit just because I couldn't get a word in edgewise. What about transporting criminals from PD to the courthouse? Right now it's just right up in the elevator, but if you have it a mile away, you're going to have some problem for.
We transport the independents now.
Well, that's just something I've had people talk to me about, so I'm going to ask. What about holding cells in the PD? I thought in the past we were going to maybe not have those.
Chief, can we go to the microphone?
And I apologize, I wasn't clear on your question.
Holding cells, I believe it was said that we were going to try to not do holding cells and just send them up to county.
And generally, that's true. We do have a need for holding cells for temporary holding facilities. What we're not doing is holding prisoners for a long length of time, or we're not holding sentenced prisoners to serve out a sentence there in the facility. That's what we want to get away from and not do. But there will always be a need to have a safe, secure facility to process DUIs, to process prisoners, even on a lot of cases where we might cite that person into court and then release them. We still need a safe and secure facility to be able to process that.
You might ask me my first question. You could probably answer that one. Transportation.
Transporting criminals, right now it's just go in the elevator and go up. Is there more of a safety risk of moving them from point A to point B?
Well, there's always a risk in moving prisoners, and we certainly want to do it as safely as possible. That would also be, that certainly could be a benefit of having a secure facility. That would be one of the pros to having the facility in the courthouse, is certainly you could house prisoners there and bring them up the elevator. But, as it stands right now and in past practice, we've just been transporting, the county's been transporting, we've been transporting prisoners. So long-term prisoners are still going to be held at the county level, and they're still going to be transported for court when needed. So that's going to be an issue no matter where we're at.
Okay. I also have concerns with, some basic health concerns with what's going on right now. I understand there's mold and it's making people sick.
Certainly, I know everyone on the panel and on the board's been in that building, and it stands for itself with mold in the building and sewage leaking from pipes from the ceiling onto employees' desks. I mean, it's terrible. I mean, this project is it's a decade overdue, and that's how dire the situation is. And I know this commission, I know this committee sees that and knows that something needs to be done, and that's really the most important thing that I hope comes out tonight, is that we get good, clear direction, because we're inefficient right now. We're just inefficient with with city services being broke up all over the city, and we have great employees that work hard for the city every day, and police and fire and public works and electric department is in every aspect. We've got employees that do an outstanding job, and they deserve a safe and professional environment, and the community deserves a professional, open environment that is accessible to them. So we just ask that you take that into consideration.
I personally feel that the police department we have now is a mixture between a sardine can and a dungeon. It has no lighting. It's not professional. You go in, it's kind of scary going in. It's not inviting. I don't know if we're going to have enough room to add on to what you wanted, to what needs to go in there within the plans that I have. I have some back there. That's my main concern, is that if you're wanting to put, number one, the dispatch center needs to be bigger. There's not a lot of room in there. I'd like to see more people be able to work in that. And right now, you cannot do that. I was in there once. A while ago, I was in there, and I did a ride-along, and I sat in the dispatch. And it's very cramped with just me and the current person that was on duty. That's cramped, and you had other officers in there and everything. It's hard to get around. There needs to be men and women locker rooms. There needs to be a lot of things that need to be added. I think we need to take that into consideration. As right now, that it's out of date. It's scrunched in, and I think we need to find a way to get more. We don't know how to do it. I'm all over all these recommendations, but I think we got to find a way to update that makes it presentable. City Hall itself looks menacing, and I think lighting and stuff like that will help that. Just anything to make it a better professional atmosphere, and less stairs. And I really feel that we need to make that place presentable. I know people are not coming to Coffeyville just to see our City Hall, but if you go in there to pay your bills or whatever it is you need to do, then it needs to look like it's a City Hall, and not like and not like it does right now. That's all I have. That's all the questions I have.
Any other questions, commissioners? Well, I would pair to say the same thing Mr. Taylor mentioned. I don't think we're going to reach it. We've got so much information here, we can't reach. I don't think we can reach a decision this evening. And this commission, city staff, and other players, we're going to need another work session to work through some of the details. Because I, for one, voiced it earlier. You were talking about basic costs, saving $3 million. I think that the cost there could be significantly higher than that. Could be a savings involved, but I, for one, wife and I did plan to remodel on the house, and we set a budget, and we blew through that in 2 weeks. And I could see the same thing happening on this kind of a project as well. So we need to get a little closer to some of the numbers if we can, and get some additional input from city staff. I think we would need to have the architects at that meeting to answer some questions. Get some.
How long have we been out of City Hall?
Too long.
7 months.
Too long.
I would.
And we're no closer today to making a decision than we were the day that we. I mean, how much longer can we ask for these people to experience this dysfunction?
It's a bit embarrassing, too.
Well, I'm not suggesting months. I'm suggesting another meeting, in a week, two, something pretty quick so that we can finally, absorb all of this. I mean, this is a lot of information to absorb, and then make a intelligent decision rather than just making a snap decision tonight, do this or do that.
Well, that's what I would find acceptable is at the end of our regular commission meeting tonight, that the commission could have a consensus if we're going to start talking in work sessions about building new or remodeling. I mean, we gotta start going down the road. We can't just keep talking about it for 2 or 3 more months, and
So basically,
we're gonna have to do it or get off the pot, you know what I mean?
I want at least a little bit of time to think over pros, cons, everything. I can't drop something in my lap and say, here's my decision just in an hour's time.
I agree.
I'm not asking for a long period of time, I'm asking for a little. We've had no problems having a meeting, and then instead of meeting sitting a work session the next week. It's been done, I think we should do something like that.
Well, the responsibility to figure out what's going on across the street should have been right up here all the time. Because honestly, these guys here aren't going to be in front of the firing squad come April. Like he said, they're going to speak to us come April. And if we're going to screw up, it needs to happen right up here. It should have been done in September. We should have already had noise being across the street. Or wherever.
I concur 100%. I think that this is drawn out long enough. I think that we've had 7 months to know that we've, basically, this has been lack of leadership, lack of something, because we're, like I said, we're no more further along today than the day they moved out.
All right. It's 6:30. Well, let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break and then reconvene, and we'll begin the regular city commission meeting at 6:40. Panel, thank you. And please don't